All right, for the back of the chasuble is one piece and it's cut on the fold. So I have folded the fabric in half. I want it to run down this pattern. This pattern here I want to be the middle of the vestment. So I have my fold on that edge and I'm going to put the pattern piece on that edge. Now the pattern has, the front and the back are almost exactly the same, except that the back is a little bit longer and the neckline on the front is a little lower. However, if you can make the back and the front exactly the same length, it won't matter. That inch won't matter. You do have to cut the neck though. So this is the back, so it's the higher neckline. I'm going to use it on this side, because that's the way there is no seam allowance. I added the seam allowance around the edges on this one, but if on your pattern, usually when you get it, the seam allowance isn't there, you need to add it. If you forget it, it won't matter, because again, it'll only reduce the size of your vestment about 1/2 inch. Okay, so I'll pin this down and cut this one out on the fold. The other vest, why don't I add seam allowance? Well, because sometimes you don't need them. Like for the Latin chasuble, you don't have a seam allowance on it. You don't want a seam allowance on it. And I made these patterns from vestments that were already sewn together, so I didn't add the seam allowance at that time. Okay, that's the back cut out. I'm going to take the pattern off because I'm going to use it for the front. And set this aside. The fabric at the end here I can use for the smaller pieces, which I'm not going to do right now. After I have the two large pieces cut, I'll do the small ones. Now I'm ready to cut the front. Now the front pattern should be cut on the edge, not on a fold. And then you sew the two halves together so that you can get your 6 to 8 inches at the neck. However, that's a waste of fabric, because in order to do that and still have my patterns match, I have to fold the fabric. I want this to be the middle, of my ofri going down, which means I have to sew here, and I need seam allowance, which would come to here. So in order for the fabric back and front to match, I would have to fold my fabric on this pattern here, and then cut it with a seam allowance, and I would waste about 3-inch strip of fabric, which to me is a waste, especially since I have found you don't need to do it that way. Because we're closing the neck with a placket, it doesn't have to be sewn in 2 pieces. It can be sewn in 1 piece and just sliced down to open the neckline. And that's the way I'm going to do it, and I'm going to show you how to do it that way. So I need this fabric folded on, make sure this fits, you will, barely. We have seam allowance on this. So I'm going to fold it on the actual pattern where I want it to be. Let's back this up a little bit. I put pins in it so it doesn't shift. Pattern fabric is really nice to work with because you can use the patterns to your advantage to make sure that you're straight, that your fabric is lying straight, that you have your trim straight. Come on, Mitch. So I'm using the pattern to show me exactly where I want my fold to be. And I'm going to put it on that fold. Make sure that I have enough room on the other side. Can't go all the way to the bottom because I think I will go off the edge then. So I'll come up a little bit to about there. I'm going to cut this the same as the back. I can trim it down if I want to, but I don't generally do that. And I'll cut the neck out after I have it cut. Okay. This would actually be where the seam allowance is, and I have it folded here that I could fold it up to that line. Let's do it right. We will do that. And that is my front piece. I just leave the paper on that. But you can always tell the front from the back by the neckline. I'm going to use these scrap pieces to cut out maniple, chalice veil, stole, burse. The burse I cut from the other part. You need both the side and the burse itself cut on a fold. And one piece has to be a nice, in other words, evenly symmetrical. So, because you're going to put my applique here, so you want it to look. But the other piece doesn't have to be. The other piece will be the back of the burse, and it can be, the pattern can be off. We'll put it that way. And you have to make sure that your side pieces also are cut on a fold, so that when you're finished, you have these long strips, not small squares. All right, so put these together. Now out of this section here, I need maniple, stole, and chalice veil. This piece at the bottom here, I could probably get a maniple out of. This piece up here, I could get a stole out of it, but only if I go a whole lot further. Stole is a very long piece, and I'm going to turn this sideways. This pattern on this can be used either direction. Some patterns can only go one direction, some can go both directions. This happens to be one that is the same distance top and bottom, so it can go either direction. And I'm going to put it this way so I can fold it in half, hopefully, and get the stole out of this. Only as wide as there. Now again, we have to put seam allowance on this. So I need to see a bowl. And the stole curves. So it has to be big enough that it can curve, which this doesn't. And it doesn't have enough seam allowance. So I'll probably get the maniple out of this, or I could get one stole and fold it this way. Get the stole out of it going this direction. Again, I need to match patterns so that the stole will be the same on both sides. Okay, so I have to go down a whole lot more. Still not quite enough. Just about makes it. Go a little bit further so I have seam allowance. That's not seam allowance. Alright, match your patterns. course, if it didn't have patterns, that would save you a little bit of fabric, but not enough to make it. And there's no rule, as I explained in the, I hope I explained thoroughly in the seminar video. There's no rules that say you have to use church fabric. You can use floral fabric. You can use, like some of the Italian vestments are really huge floral. They got huge flowers all over them. Myself, I think they're a bit gaudy, but that's what they like. And so that's fine. Okay, so I'll put this here, and I will cut it out with seam allowance all the way around, including the edge, the top edge here. This is, I'm doing the straight style. I see I have it folded in. If you wanted the shovel style, you just unfold that, but I prefer this. When I'm making, I want straight. I prefer the straight, unless a priest asks for it. That's what I do. How much seam allowance? It's up to you. I use about a ½ inch. You're going to trim it off anyway, the excess. You could even do an inch. Again, it's going to trim back. So whatever you put on there is fine. If you're quilter and you like 1/4 inch, I wouldn't do that. 1/4 inch is just, even though we're probably going to end up trimming it back to a 1/4 inch, because of the fraying of the fabric, give yourself extra. And give yourself seam allowance at the bottom as well. Okay, that's the stole. The mantle I can get out of this piece here, I'm sure. I'm going to see if I can cut the mantle as one piece. You can cut it, I mean, it's made as 2 pieces. You can cut it as 2 pieces with seam allowance, or you can cut it on a fold. Not sure this will work on a fold because of the way this fabric is, so I'll probably end up doing it as 2 pieces. Does it have to follow your pattern? No. I mean, you want both sides to be the same, but notice I'm not going down straight down the middle of these. I'm just going wherever it'll fit. This goes over the arm. It's under the vestment. It doesn't get seen. Now, if you're one of those people who is a perfectionist and has to have everything matched, by all means, help yourself. It's your vestment. Do it the way you like it. I am not a perfectionist. I'm a pragmatist. And I do whatever works. Now, you don't like that. See, there's a cut in there. That's going to ruin it. I saw that as I was cutting, so we'll have to do this. Let's try this. This piece is fine, but this piece isn't. So, line up these designs. What about this piece over here? definitely need Chasuble now. Now I'm going to keep a couple of these big pieces of fabric for the placket. I'll just put them aside and I'll explain that later. I need a Chasuble. And let me take it out of this wide piece over on that side. If you forget to put seam allowance, don't worry about it. Again, your pieces will just be a little bit small, and that's perfectly all right. There are no hard and fast rules concerning size. I'm going to fold this down a pattern again. I hope. What's up here? I'm going to be working on this side, so I'll pull it over. So I'm going to fold it down this pattern. On this fold, and it doesn't quite fit. I need to move up another pattern. Go to the next one. I could do this one. Which would work. So I'll do that one. This is the middle of the veil, and I'd like that to be the middle of the design. There is good. Doesn't leave any seam allowance though, so let's try the middle of this design. I didn't put seam allowance. So I'm not going to put seam allowance. All right, that's all the pieces that I need. And we're ready to start putting on trim.